Hello everyone, welcome back. Malls are designed to be full of people, light and noise. But what happens when the shutters go down and the hallways are left empty? Today I bring you 4 real stories from people who discovered that in the darkness of a mall, the rules of reality can simply stop working. Get ready, because after this, you'll never look at a storefront the same way again. My name is Marcus, and I worked for 3 years at a men's suit store in a well-known shopping mall in the city. Those who work in retail know that closing time is the most stressful, but also the loneliest. You have to leave everything spotless for the next day, where the rest of the mall turns off its lights, and only the security guards remain in the distance. One Thursday night, I was left alone finishing up the gala section. We had 6 mannequins in the main window, all dressed in black tuxedos. I remember perfectly aligning them before going to the warehouse to drop off the steamer. When I returned 5 minutes later, I noticed something didn't fit. The mannequin on the right, the one closest to the door, was no longer looking toward the mall hallway. Its head was turned toward the inside of the store, looking at me. I felt a chill, but I tried to be logical. I thought the stand was loose, and the weight of the head had caused it to rotate due to the vibration of the air conditioning. I approached to straighten it, but the mannequin's neck was stiff, locked. I had to use both hands to turn it back to the front. As I did, my fingers brushed against the mannequin's plastic skin. It wasn't cold like the rest. It was warm, with a temperature very similar to that of a human arm. I stepped back, feeling short of breath. That's when I heard a sound coming from the fitting rooms at the back of the store. It was the sound of a zipper going up and down, over and over. Zip, zip, zip. I froze because I had locked the fitting rooms myself half an hour ago. I turned on my phone's flashlight and pointed it toward the hallway of mirrors, just in time to see a tall, rigid shadow sliding behind one of the curtains. I walked toward the fitting rooms, with my legs trembling. The sound of the zipper stopped abruptly as soon as my light hit the curtain of the 3rd store. It was closed from the inside, but what made me drop my phone was seeing what protruded from under the curtain: smooth plastic feet, without toes, the same beige color as our mannequins. But those feet were planted firmly on the floor, as if someone was straining to stand up. Armed with courage, or perhaps pure adrenaline shock, I pulled the curtain open with force. There was no one there. The fitting room was empty, but the mirror in front of me was fogged up, as if someone had been breathing near the glass just seconds ago. In the center of the steam, someone had drawn a grotesque smiling face with their finger. Suddenly, I heard a crash of breaking glass at the store entrance. I ran toward the window display and collapsed at the sight. The mannequin I'd straightened minutes before was now on the floor, shattered. But it hadn't fallen. Something had hit it with such force that its plastic chest was caved in. The worst part was that, among the remains of broken plastic, there wasn't empty air. There was something resembling dry, grayish muscle tissue. The guards arrived shortly after and found no one. But the security cameras showed that while I was running toward the fitting rooms, a figure identical to a mannequin but with fluid, human movements jumped from the display and disappeared into the dark hallways of the mall. That night, the store was closed for renovations. I was never allowed to see the full video. But a guard confessed to me that it wasn't the first time it had happened. He told me that some mannequins spend so much time surrounded by people that, somehow, they begin to absorb our lives. And when the lights go out, they try to walk on their own. I quit that very morning. Now, every time I pass a window display, I can't help but look the mannequins in the eye, fearing I'll see that spark of life that should never be there. My name is David, and my first job as a guard was in a huge shopping mall that had just opened a 3-level play area, complete with plastic tunnels and a giant ball pit. My boss warned me, if you hear noises on the 3rd level, don't go up, just report it. I thought it was a prank to scare the new guy, until my shift at 2 a.m. came around. I was walking near the children's area when I heard an unmistakable sound, the rustling of plastic. Someone was moving inside the elevated tunnels. I aimed my flashlight and saw one of the colored tubes shaking, as if a child were crawling hurriedly through the inside. My first thought was that some kid had stayed hidden after closing to play a prank. "Hey, the mall is closed. You have to come out of there," I shouted as I approached the safety netting. No one replied, but the movement stopped right above my head. Then a red ball fell from the top of the tunnel and bounced silently to my feet. I looked up and, through one of the transparent plastic bubbles in the tunnel, I saw a small hand pressed against the material. But it wasn't a normal hand. The fingers were too long and the nails looked jagged, as if it had been scratching the plastic walls for hours. Suddenly, a high-pitched, distorted child's laugh echoed through the play area's speakers, even though the audio system was turned off. The hand on the plastic began to slide slowly, leaving a trail of something viscous and dark. It was then I realized that whatever was up there wasn't trying to hide from me. It was waiting for me to come up and find it. The sound of the laughter turned into a wet gurgling. I froze as I saw that the movement in the tunnels wasn't just one child, but something that seemed to slide without bones. Suddenly, something heavy fell from the tunnel directly into the ball pit with a dull thud. Thousands of colored balls leaped into the air, and then silence reigned again. But the pit wasn't still. The balls began to churn in the center, as if something large was swimming underneath, approaching the edge where I stood. I backed away but tripped over a wooden bench. At that moment, a head peeked out from between the plastic spheres. It had no hair, and its skin was a grayish, almost translucent color, like that of a fish that has never seen the light. Its eyes were disproportionately large and lacked eyelids, glowing with a sickly yellow under my flashlight. That thing opened its mouth, and I heard the laughter again, but this time it didn't come from the speakers. It came from its throat, mimicking me perfectly. "Hey, the mall is closed," it repeated in my own voice, but with a mocking and macabre tone. I turned round and ran for the emergency exit, hearing the balls popping behind me, indicating that the thing had crawled out of the pit and was chasing me on all fours across the rubber floor. I managed to slam the metal door shut just in time. I heard a loud thud on the other side, followed by frantic scratching against the steel. The next day, I told the head of security what I saw. He wasn't surprised. He took me to the monitoring room and showed me old recordings. Pale figures crawling out of the ventilation ducts directly into the children's area every night. He told me the mall was built over an old orphanage that burned down in the 1950s. I never went back to that shift. Now, every time I pass a play area and see a ball move on its own, I can't help but think about whatever is living down there, waiting for the next guard to get too close. My name is Laura, and I've always preferred working alone. That's why I didn't mind staying until 2 a.m. to organize the inventory in the perfumery and cosmetics section. The mall at night is a strange place. The sounds of the pipes and the creaking of the building are amplified, but after a few hours you stop hearing them. Or at least, that's what I thought. I was in front of the large mirrored wall in the makeup area. As I cleaned the counter, I looked up and saw my own reflection. At first, everything was normal, but after a minute, I felt a strange sense of dizziness, as if my brain couldn't process what my eyes were seeing. I scratched my cheek with my right hand. In the mirror, my reflection took a fraction of a second longer to make the same move. I froze. I stared intently into my own eyes in the glass. I moved my hand again, this time quickly, and the reflection went completely out of sync. It was a delay of nearly a second. My reflection in the mirror stood still, looking at me with a neutral expression, while I had already lowered my hand. It wasn't an entity, it wasn't a monster. It was my own image that wasn't following the laws of physics. Panic began to rise in my chest. I decided I'd had enough and grabbed my things to leave. But as I turned to walk out of the aisle, I heard something that stopped my heart. Behind me, from the glass, I heard the sound of footsteps. Footsteps walking on the same floor as me, but sounding inside the wall. And the most terrifying part was that even though my back was to the mirror, I clearly felt a gaze pierce the back of my neck, and an invisible hand, cold as ice, brushed my shoulder. But when I turned around, no one was there. Just the empty mirror reflecting the silent hallway. I left the perfumery section almost running, trying to ignore the sensation of that cold brush on my shoulder. The mall's central hallway was submerged in a bluish dimness from the emergency lights. Every step I took generated an echo, but I soon realized something that took my breath away. My steps weren't sounding alone. There was a second echo, a second after mine, as if someone were following me at the exact distance, mimicking my rhythm to camouflage themselves. I stopped dead. The echo stopped a second later, just as it had with the mirror. No one was in the hallways. The security cameras were moving with their mechanical hum, but the air around me felt heavy, as if the space were compressing. I decided to look at the store windows as I walked. What I saw made me want to scream, but the voice wouldn't come out. In the glass of the stores I was passing, my reflection wasn't walking with me. My reflection was several meters behind, standing still in the dark, watching me advance while it remained static. I reached the employee exit and swiped my card through the reader. The device beeped red. Error. I tried again, desperate, as I felt the cold in the hallway increase drastically. I looked down and saw my own shadow, projected by the emergency light, beginning to detach from my feet, stretching toward the far end of the hallway as if something were pulling it from the darkness. It wasn't a physical shadow. It was the void itself, claiming my presence. In one last attempt, the door gave way. I burst out into the outdoor parking lot, and the night heat hit my face. I got into my car and didn't look in the rearview mirror until I was several kilometers away. When I finally dared to look at my reflection in the car's mirror, everything seemed normal. But there was one detail on the back seat of my car. In the reflection, there was a damp mark on the upholstery, in the exact shape of a hand resting there. In reality, the seat was dry. I resigned over the phone that same night. I understood that there are places that, when they become empty, stop being part of our world and become a trap for anyone caught in the shift of reality. I am an elevator and escalator technician. I was called to a mall on the outskirts of the city. 1. Sunday at 11:30 p.m. The report said the North Wing escalators were making a strange noise. Upon arrival, the security guard opened the side door for me and said, "Don't take long, this place gets heavy at night." I just laughed. I was used to working alone in empty buildings. I finished the repair on the 3rd floor, around 1:15 a.m. I gathered my tools and headed to the escalators to go down to the parking lot on level -1. Since the energy saving system was active, the escalators were stationary, so I started walking down them. I went down the first flight from floor 3 to floor 2. Everything was normal. I crossed the hallway to take the next flight down to floor 1. When I finished descending that second flight, I looked up expecting to see the central plaza of floor 1, but I froze. I was in exactly the same place I had come from, in front of the same clothing store on floor 2. I thought I had gotten turned around in the dim light. I shook my head and went down again, counting every step. When I reached the bottom, the store's neon sign greeted me again, level 2. My heart began to pound in my ears. I decided not to use the escalators anymore and looked for the elevator. I pressed the parking lot button. The doors closed and I felt the downward motion. But when the doors opened, the hallway was the same. The same flickering lights, the same smell of floor wax, and the level 2 sign. I was caught in a physical loop. That's when I heard something that turned my blood to ice. From the end of the hallway, the sound of an escalator starting to move on its own, groaning as if something extremely heavy were ascending toward where I was. I pressed myself against the elevator wall, not daring to step out. The creaking of the escalator was rhythmic, heavy, as if the metal itself was suffering under an invisible weight. I decided I couldn't stay there. I ran toward the emergency stairs, the concrete ones behind the heavy metal doors. I flew down 3 floors, ignoring the pain in my knees, but when I opened the 4th door, the sign on the wall still said the same thing in red letters, level 2. The mall seemed to have turned into a Mobius strip, an infinite circle from which there was no escape. Desperate, I pulled out my radio to call the guard for help. But the only thing coming out of the speaker was static that gradually began to form words. It was my own voice, recorded minutes before, repeating, "Why am I still on level 2? Then I realized it wasn't just space that was trapped, but time as well. Reality was folding in on itself. I closed my eyes, sat on the floor, and tried to calm my breathing. I remembered something an old colleague once told me: if the place traps you, stop fighting it. I turned off my flashlight and stayed in total darkness for what felt like hours. I stopped trying to go down. I stood up and, instead of looking for the exit, I walked toward the center of the hallway and went up. I returned to floor 3, the place where I started the repair. As soon as I set foot on the top floor, I heard a metallic click throughout the building. The emergency lights changed hue, and the air felt lighter. I went down the stairs one more time, this time without looking at the signs, my mind blank. When I reached the end of the flight, the cold air from the parking lot hit me in the face. I was out. The guard looked at me with a deathly paleness when I handed over the keys. He told me I'd been missing for 4 hours, even though for me only 20 minutes had passed. I never returned to that mall. Sometimes I dream that I'm still going down those stairs, and I wake up just before reading the sign on the wall, with the constant fear that one day, upon waking, I will truly find myself again in front of that clothing store, trapped forever on level 2. I hope these stories reminded you why we sometimes feel that strange urge to leave a mall as night falls. If you ever get stuck in a loop or feel your reflection watching you, remember, the silence in these places is never truly empty. If you like the video, subscribe and let me know in the comments which story gave you the chills. See you in the next nightmare.